part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Well, hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Ball Card Show. I'm Jason Otero.
I'm Gary LeMaster.
And this is the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast
for the sports collector.
As always, we are brought to you by the Press Play Podcast Network. If you haven't checked them out, do it today. Lots of great content on there, all kinds of sports entertainment, just content for your ears to soak in. So check out P3 Press Play Podcast. How you doing today, Gary? How you feeling?
I'm not bad. I mean, it's a little weird that we're recording on a Friday morning instead of our normal Thursday night, but we had a lot going on last night. It's like back end podcast business stuff. And by the end of it, I think we were both just like, nah.
I know. The only downside is, once again, we're not in the same room, and it's hard to fabricate the disdain that we get for each other when we're sitting 2 feet away.
Distance makes the heart grow fonder. Is that what it is?
We don't need that. we need
to be close to each other, so we just really hate each other for the 45 minutes we're recording.
That's right. You know, this week is without a doubt going to be just highlighting the madness that has been trades going on, massive moves. I can't recall in any recent memory this many huge players getting moved around in the NFL in a short period of time. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think that it's not just in the NFL. Over the last 10 to 12 days in NFL and MLB, it has been like a piranha attacking a shank of lamb that got thrown into the Amazon. Like, it's been crazy. I'm with you. Did you like that metaphor that I used there? Or was that just
it was a bit excessive. I don't know that it made a whole lot of sense.
Sure it did.
It's like
piranha swarm and attack meat, and if somebody threw like a shank of a lamb,
that's right up there with I stubbed my toe in a puddle of regret.
So good is what you're saying.
For those of you that don't know, Gary is a lyricist, and we had quite the butt rock band. I wouldn't say we were Nickelback-esque, but we were.
Don't say that. Now you made me just wallow in my own self-loathing.
That wasn't cool. I grabbed a random lyric that I have given a hard time about, but nonetheless, he is a lyricist and a poet and didn't know it. So let's jump right into it. Some huge news. First off, let's talk about the city of Cleveland, what the fans are going through right now. Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, obviously at this point, everybody knows the Browns acquired Deshaun Watson after. So last week on our episode, we talked about this whole situation. And at that point in time, the news had just come down like 2 hours before we recorded that the Browns were out. Deshaun Watson had said, nope, I'm not going to Cleveland. And that left everything in Cleveland in this complete level of disarray because they had pissed off their actual quarterback at the time. And he was saying, listen, guys, I'm literally never taking another snap for you again. So figure it out. You did this to yourself. And once the Browns realized that, I think that was when they decided to guarantee every stinking dollar in their contract offer to Deshaun Watson. And an extra $80 million guaranteed will usually make people change their mind.
Yeah, you know, it does have a nice ring to it.
Yeah, I mean, $230 million guaranteed. And here's what's crazy about the whole situation. Obviously, sports agents are smart and they know what they're doing for the most part. Every once in a while, you get a guy that's just a complete like moron, but for the most part, these dudes are sharp. Deshaun Watson's contract is structured in such a way that his base salary for year one is right at $1 million. But he's guaranteed 40 some million dollars.
Yeah.
So even if he does get suspended under the NFL's personal conduct policy, which would be a minimum of 6 games if that occurs, absolute worst case scenario, if he's out the entire year, he still gets all of his $39 million guaranteed and he'll get fined and lose $1 million.
Yeah. He that was structured pretty well for him. Let's talk about this guy we mentioned last week, Baker Mayfield. What he thought was going to happen, how he expected things to go down, and how they're sitting right now for him.
Well, the problem for him right now is that the market for quarterbacks is starting to shrink because The Falcons traded, which is another guy we're going to talk about. We'll get into that in a minute, but like the dominoes here, the Colts were rumored to be very interested in Baker Mayfield. And then
or at least Baker was interested in them.
Yep. And then they traded for Matt Ryan. The Seahawks are the newest team to be rumored to be interested in Baker Mayfield, but it also sounds like Cleveland is holding out for a lot, which I don't understand because you can't keep Baker Mayfield on your roster. You just can't. So take what you can get for him rather than cut him. Because if you cut him, he's the type of dude who's going to sign in your division and try to wreck your life.
I read an opinion piece about Pittsburgh being a possibility.
Mary Kay Cabot, who I'm not a huge fan of, but she does seem to get a lot of interior information, has said flat out that her sources in the Steelers organization have said that if the Browns cut Baker Mayfield, that Pittsburgh will jump all over him.
I think that is the most Baker thing that Baker could do.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Like if the Browns don't trade him, like if somebody offers you a 3rd round pick, take it. Because you know you're cutting him if you don't get a trade partner.
Yeah.
And what I've heard is they're trying to hold out for a first. Well, who needs a quarterback at this point? I mean, Seattle.
Don't you say it, or I'll punch you in the mouth.
I wasn't going to say Miami because they signed Teddy Bridgewater. Let's be honest.
That was very clever.
They got Teddy. Who else needs a quarterback? I mean, I guess Atlanta still hasn't filled a spot, but they signed Marcus Mariota. So I think that their thought process is they're going to roll with Marcus Mariota, maybe draft a quarterback and use Mariota as a bridge. There's not a lot of teams left. Houston seems very committed to Davis Mills, and they didn't even ask for Baker Mayfield in that trade that got the Browns Deshaun Watson. So if he was going to go there, he would have been part of that trade. There's not really any spots that you look at and you go, man, they're a quarterback away, or they need a functional NFL quarterback. The level of quarterback play in the league is shockingly high right now. I mean, Carolina, maybe. I mean, you're stuck with Sam Darnold right now, but you also got to realize that Jimmy Garoppolo is still out there. Mm-hmm. And I'm a Baker apologist to an extent. Like, I think the kid can play. I think that as a former coach, I know that personality type, and I know how you have to coach that personality type. And if you coach it properly, you'll get great results. But I'm not so sure that for a team that is on the fringe of becoming relevant, that Jimmy G might not be a better fit just because he's going to be more consistent and more steady.
Right.
You know what you're going to get week to week. You may not have the ceiling that Baker provides you, but you have a much higher floor.
Do you think there's any panic with Baker at this point? I mean, his personality was kind of like, here's what I'm going to demand, and here's what everybody expects, and everybody needs me, and it's kind of gone crickets. Like,
I don't know that there's panic. I think if there is panic, it's more around the idea that he might be surprised that he isn't wanted by more people. Mm-hmm. Like, and that could in the long term have some effect on his success, just because, again, that personality type needs affirmation. It needs to be appreciated. It needs to know that people need it. And he's not getting that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I could see a situation where he ends up very much like Mitch Trubisky did last year, where he has to go somewhere and be a backup for a year on a 1-year deal.
Wouldn't that be wild? I mean, the people that don't like Baker, I land mostly in that camp. It's almost like that annoying fan's like, well, he needs to learn some humility.
Yeah,
I think, like I said before, it's that same chip on his shoulder that was exactly what the Browns needed to turn that program around.
Oh, for sure. And to be frank, if you look at Baker's career numbers through 4 years, and you look at Trubisky's career numbers through 4 years, they're pretty similar. Mm-hmm. Like, they're kind of right there with each other. I think Trubisky might have a better won-loss record. Mm-hmm. Baker threw more touchdowns, but he also threw more picks.
Yeah.
Like, they're pretty similar as far as their resumes go. So would it shock me if he ends up signing as a backup somewhere for a year? No, I mean, New Orleans is filled up. They re-signed Jameis Winston. So it's like all those spots are just kind of gone now.
Yep. All right, let's move over to Indy. Matt Ryan going up there. I did not see this one coming. I'm a little surprised.
Well, I'm not surprised that he got traded, only because, and the difference between what Cleveland did and what Atlanta did was Cleveland tried to do it all on the sly and hope that nobody would find out. Atlanta was honest with Matt Ryan and said, hey, you're basically you're in the twilight of your career. You're where Phillip Rivers was 2 or 3 years ago. We need to get younger. You're taking up a lot of cap space. If we can't find anybody else, we'll bring you back, but let's go ahead and push back your guaranteed money date. Are you cool with that? And we'll see if we can't accommodate a trade for you, even if we don't get Deshaun Watson here. I think that Matt Ryan makes the Colts the favorite in that division.
Yeah, I agree. I
think by a lot, he makes them the favorite in that division. He's going to bring a steadying hand. He's not flashy, but you know exactly what you're going to get. And unlike Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan doesn't melt down when the pressure comes on.
And here's the crazy thing to think about with Matt Ryan, just doing his job in Indy. Jonathan Taylor's going to look even better than he does, which I don't know how that's possible. Yeah, but it is possible.
Well, toward the end of the season, the Colts were facing so many 7 and 8 man boxes, and Carson Wentz couldn't do anything about it to get teams out of that. So yeah, I don't disagree with you. Matt Ryan against the blitz is a pretty good quarterback. Matt Ryan's going to be able to identify those stacked boxes and take advantage of them. And it's going to force teams to keep 6 in the box. And if you keep 6 in the box against Jonathan Taylor and leave him one-on-one with a linebacker, he's going to win more often than not.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, let's move on to one I'm very excited and quite honestly, astonished, shocked. I don't exactly know all the feelings that I have. I'm still processing them, but
you got hooked.
Just like I said a couple weeks ago, Miami always finds a way to pull through.
Is that what you said a couple weeks ago?
You just have to trust. You just have to trust the front office a little bit every now and then.
Oh,
because they were playing chess while we were playing checkers. And
is that what it was?
Tyreek Hill is a Miami Dolphin. Yeah. Another acquisition same week, offensive tackle Armstead. That's a massive deal as well. Not getting talked about as much.
That's a bigger deal to me than Tyreek Hill is to the effectiveness of their offense.
But the Dolphins are making a lot of moves. All of a sudden you look around and they're even strategic. They're not just random picks. Like I feel like over the years Miami would make trades and acquire people, and there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what they were trying to build.
Explain to me the strategy of going and getting Tyreek Hill.
Okay. Tyreek Hill is not simply, I'm going to just go ahead and cut to the chase here. He's not simply a deep route threat.
Agreed.
He is able to very effectively take those small plays and make them huge. He is running nonstop. He's creating confusion in the secondary pre-snap all the time. So I think that is a huge advantage when you've had a quarterback who has been pretty one-dimensional. You had these accuracy numbers, but the average passes were very short. I think Tyreek Hill can make those short threats dangerous. And he's still going to keep some defense honest. The question will be, which it always has been, can Tua throw the freaking ball? And a lot of people don't think so. I've been pretty disappointed with what I've seen when it comes to throwing the ball with any distance. But he also hasn't had a lot of time. So I feel like this year is a year where you can't drag it out any longer. He was hurt, so we didn't get to see anything. Now he's back, but he didn't have any time. And who's he throwing to? Well, this year you have one of the most dynamic athletes in the game on the team. You have investment in the O-line to create a little more time. So it's simply either is going to be something or it isn't with Tua. But good news, our backup can throw the ball. And we still have Tyreek Hill.
Well, so here's my response to that. So Tyreek Hill, the reason that Tyreek Hill got so many free releases on underneath routes in Kansas City is because Patrick Mahomes was his quarterback, and everybody knows that Patrick Mahomes can throw the ball 80 yards in the air off of 1 foot falling backwards. When there's no reason to be afraid of Tyreek Hill burning you over the top because the quarterback can't throw the ball more than 40 yards in the air. He's going to start getting jammed. He's going to start getting physically annihilated at the line, and then we'll see if he can get off of those. Tyreek Hill has not had, for the vast majority of his career, a cornerback 8 inches from his face at the line of scrimmage.
All right, well, I got an idea then.
And where are you going to put Tyreek Hill?
Hey, I already got an idea, bro. It's already taken care of. We're going to go back a few years. We're going to go through some SEC football. We just run Wildcat the whole game.
I mean, I that's my point. And the other thing that it has me a little bit concerned is Tyreek Hill in Kansas City spent most of his time either pre-snap movement or in a slot off the line. Well, Jalen Waddle's your slot guy. Jalen Waddle physically can't play outside. He'll get destroyed coming off the line. He just won't get off the ball. He's not big enough dude. So I've heard Devontae Parker's now on the trade block because his salary is a little hefty to carry along with what they just gave Tyreek Hill. Who you playing outside?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some questions there. Do I think Tyreek Hill is the best receiver Miami's had in a hot minute? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Probably since like Mark Clayton and Mark Duper.
Wow.
Best receiver they've had. Well, think about it. You're a Dolphins fan. Who have the Dolphins had at receiver since then that you're like, yeah, he's a beast?
Yeah, like that? No, nobody.
Yeah.
So
there
were flashes of brilliance with Landry, but then once people figured out he was just going to catch the line of scrimmage and run, that kind of ended that.
Yeah. So it's like he's the best receiver Miami's had in 35 years. So I hope for his sake, because he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory, I hope that for his sake, they figure out how to get the ball into his hands, especially with what they're paying. And I'm sure the coaching staff there, Mike McDaniel, is pretty sharp when it comes to offense. So hopefully they can get that figured out. But I will say this when it comes to Tyreek Hill and the hobby, his stuff is already, in my opinion, a little bit undervalued. I think it's going to dip more now. If you feel a little saucy and you want to speculate on something that could make you some money, and I'm not sitting here recommending this as a hard buy, but if you are a gambler, there are worse gambles that you could take than to snag Tyreek Hill on the low right now. And if he puts together a typical Tyreek Hill season with Tua throwing to him, you're going to make some money.
Yeah, I agree with that. What's interesting to me, too, is you had these accusations from Flores about were they tanking the season? Was he being offered incentives to lose the game for draft picks, blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously, if any of that would materialize as evidence, we got a huge problem for Stephen Ross. And then a short time after this, hey, here's a new coach. We're going a different direction. Tua's our guy. And now he's spending some serious money. Which
leads me to think the accusations were true.
Covering tracks or just moving forward?
Nah, covering tracks. Faux show.
That was an expensive mistake on his part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have been more expensive if he had been forced to sell the team.
We're going to jump into MLB, but let's hold it for next week and let's jump into the story. The largest single break, cost-wise, right? Total amount.
Yes,
spent.
it was $1.2 million.
Yeah. So walk us through this. It was 25 cases of flaws. It was broken up. Each person in the break paid $40,000, and the break took 8 hours.
Yeah, it was an 8-hour break. It was a $40,000 buy-in, 30 spots, obviously, NBA break. And it was 10 cases of first off the line and 15 cases of hobby flawless, which is, I haven't even looked at the price point of that product, but I'm going to guess around 40 grand a case, 45 grand a case, something like that. They re-random teams after every case, which if I was buying into that, if I got one of the big teams on the first roll, I'd be pissed.
Right.
But they did the break. It was yesterday. Total buy-in was 1.2 million. I'm guessing, and it was run by Leighton. I'm guessing that they probably profited somewhere in the $400,000 range because those 15 cases of hobby were allocated prices, which is still high, but they were probably 20 to 25 grand in those cases.
Good money in 8 hours.
Yeah, it's real good money in 8 hours. I mean, Leighton probably, if you look at their numbers, they're a more expensive break house anyway, but They also pull most of the big cards. Nobody will ever convince me that Panini doesn't know what cards are in certain cases and don't ship them to certain breakers.
That's scandalous.
It's scandalous, but it's no more scandalous than Probstein shield bidding auctions and everything else. It's like one of the things about this hobby is it's very easily manipulated.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
You pick up anything this week?
Did I pick up anything this week? I'm trying to think. A couple of little things. I've been snagging up Cade Cavalli when I can. I think that I've talked about him before. I know we're going to talk about baseball more next week because opening day is going to be right on the doorstep. But that dude's going to start 20 games this year, I think, for the Nationals. If you've never watched the dude pitch, you should go watch him pitch and then make a decision on whether you think he's a buy or not. Here's what I will tell you. The dude routinely throws his fastball with movement 100 miles an hour, and it doesn't look like he's doing anything more than just like soft tossing a baseball. His mechanics are ridiculously good. He's not one of these dudes that's going to blow out a shoulder or an elbow because his mechanics are a little bit off. It looks effortless. And then his changeup, he throws that fastball with a little bit of like right cutting movement on it. And then his fastball goes from 100 to his changeup going 89, and it looks identical for 42 feet. And then the bottom falls out of it. It's filthy, absolutely filthy. And I realize that this is probably a little bit, hyperbolic, but if he can stay healthy and stay mentally tough, so those are the two ifs, he might be the closest thing we've seen to Nolan Ryan since Nolan Ryan.
Those are some big words.
Go watch him pitch. It's
All
filthy.
Right.
It's absolutely filthy. And his in the hobby, his stuff is kicking up. I picked up a Bowman First, a green of 99 of his this week for pretty cheap. I found somebody that I just put out was buying post, and somebody hit me up and we negotiated a pretty good deal. I've got a couple of his autos already, but I'm snagging his stuff when I can, because even if as a rookie he comes out and isn't fantastic, as long as he can stay healthy in the long run, I think he's going to be in that next wave of guys that we look at like we do Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander and Zach Greinke right now.
I only picked up one card. It was at an antique mall. I was between calls at work. And there was a new display that had some vintage basketball stuff out. And I snagged up a super clean Dennis Rodman 88 Fleer rookie. I'll be shocked if it's not better than a 9. $20 is what I ended up paying for it, which was a pretty solid deal on that.
What's it comp at raw? 35-40?
Somewhere in there. But it was super clean. It was already in the it had been protected the whole time. Nobody had been corners, edges, everything looks really good. And it's definitely within the 60-40 window. Top to bottom was a little bit off, just barely, if you stare at it long enough. We'll see what happens. But I was just glad to find it.
A PSA will give it a 10.
Yeah. I was just happy to find that kind of out in the wild, super clean. He had some other stuff there. It was very overpriced, but that one was a good buy. It's funny, like when you see flea markets or antique collectors that really don't know what they have, they'll put like a Jordan Common that's a $20 card up for $300, and then you'll find other stuff like this rookie for 10 or 15 under comp.
Well, that's a really good point, and we were talking about this a little bit last night. We had a couple of phone calls that are exciting for the future of the show. And one of those calls we were talking a little bit about some things like that with the hobby. And at the end of the day, if you're going to go try to find stuff at flea markets or at antique malls, don't go there trying to find the biggest names, because like you just said, Jason, most of those people are putting stuff out and the only names that they know are the biggest names, Jordan, Bird, Kareem. Like if you're looking at that 80s stuff, those are the names that are going to have prices that you just look at it and go, are you out of your mind?
Mm-hmm.
But and you find things like you just did, or you find a Scottie Pippen rookie, or you find a Charles Barkley rookie from 86 Fleer, or a Karl Malone. And those are names that those guys are like, oh, $10.
There were some 86 stickers there that I did not buy, but
were they overpriced?
Poorly. No, they weren't priced poorly. They were right in there. But that little spot's tucked away, so I might have to head back over there.
So you might have to tell me where that is.
I might not until I'm done perusing.
Done picked it over. So what else we got?
I don't have anything else on there. The only thing I was going to add in is Mosaic football this year. I jumped into a retail. I think it was 10 blasters, 6 hangers. Not a huge one, but enough to kind of get a little sample watching people rip that. I know there's been a lot of it on the shelves because it's available, but stores are charging a lot more than last year. So I was just curious to see what would be hitting that. And I got to tell you, all the decent quarterbacks seemed like they were SP in that rip.
Yeah.
Mosaic football still has some of the coolest inserts, sets. For PC, Merino is all over Mosaic, so I like that. And you have a ton of color variations, but when it comes to hitting big cards out of retail, it's not an easy rip on value. So just seeing that, we did see 1 or 2 Genesis, one with relevant player. Not a whole lot going on there. I had the Bears in that one. It was a PYT. Went Bears and Dolphins, and 1 NFL debut of Justin Fields in 10 blasters and 6 hangers. So I don't know if that's a norm for everybody. I've been hearing that's been pretty rough product to rip a lot of, but just be aware of what you're getting into. I don't feel like it's a whole lot different than what it was before. But it was pretty tough break.
Last year, Mosaic football was that way with the quarterbacks too. Like they were a little tougher. The thing with retail right now is that, and I hate to say this, but it's just the reality of it. I don't want to sound like a crotchety old man, but the flippers, which I don't hate the hustle, good for you, but there's not a business on the planet that isn't going to look at a product and say, there are people waiting outside our store for 3 hours before we open. And the moment we open, they rush in and they clear the shelves of this one specific product and immediately walk outside and sell it for 3 to 4 times what they just paid for it. There's not a business on the planet that isn't going to go, well, why don't we just raise our price to what they're selling it for out there or close to it, and we'll make more money. So that's what's caused these retailers when I first saw Mosaic football this year, I walked into a Walmart and there was a bunch of it and I got really excited and I grabbed the whole rack of hangers because I was just going to rip it. Right. And hangers, I'm used to being anywhere from $17.99 to $19.99 at Walmart, and blasters are, this year have been $24.99 for every other release. And I go to the self-checkout and start bringing stuff up. Hangers were $30 a piece. Blasters were $35 a piece. I immediately put 90% of it back. I bought 3 blasters and 1 hanger for myself and called it a day. I wasn't buying it to flip it. I was buying it to rip it all, but I'm not ripping retail at those prices. Same reason I didn't buy from flippers. It's just the value isn't there at that price point.
Mm-hmm.
It just isn't. So at the end of the day, thanks, sneaker guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Gary V. And I'm not a Gary V hater either, but thanks for that.
Yeah, it's getting interesting. So stuff's more available than it was. My brother lives out in Oregon. He's been listening to the podcast since it got rolling, and he's been trying to find any sealed product. And he finally found
Walmart on Thursdays.
Optic basketball, but somebody wanted $60 for a blaster, and I was like, bro,
yeah, no,
you're gonna have to hit a monster out of there.
If he wants an optic blaster, he should just hop on eBay and get one for $35 to $40.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing: they had opening day baseball there, and I was like, yep, you actually can hit something in that, and it's a cheap product.
Yeah.
There's wander parallels in there. I mean, it's opening day, but when you're talking about value, that's a better purchase on that one than
it's a chase product. It's a lot like Heritage is. It's a cheap product, but there are some cool chase things in there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't disagree. I'm not a huge opening day fan, but I will say this, my brain has already flipped over into baseball mode. So my focus hobby wise and just as a fan is dialed in hard on baseball right now. And that'll be a lot of what my contribution to the podcast is from a hobby standpoint, for the next few months. Baseball was my first love as a sport. It's the first sport I was introduced to, even though I ended up being a football player. I love baseball. I know you do too. So,
oh yeah, for sure. And speaking of that, next week, we're going to take a deep dive into prospecting, players to watch for that could be making their big debut in the show early in the season, players to watch, players to sell. So it's going to be a really baseball heavy episode next week, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, and
We're
probably a
gonna be doing
little
our
bit more
research as
hobby
well.
heavy than we have been lately. I know for the first probably half to 3/4 of season 1, we really deep dived every episode hard hobby wise. And we still like to talk about hobby stuff, but I know we've also morphed more into some general sports commentary with a little bit of hobby sprinkled in. Next week's going to be more of a return to our roots of just really deep diving some hobby and hobby analytics stuff. So if that's what you enjoy the most about our show, 1, you're wrong, but 2, this will be a great episode for you.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Ball Cart Show, the sports podcast.
For the Sports Collector.
Bye now.
Peace.